This video is about active transport, but it's important to put active transport, compare active transport to passive transport. We have to remember with passive transport, molecules are moving from high to low concentration down a concentration gradient. Passive transport cannot occur without a concentration gradient because molecules are just flowing from high concentration to low concentration until equilibrium is reached. Passive transport can occur through the phospholipids in simple diffusion or through carrier and channel proteins in facilitated diffusion. Both of those are passive transport. This video, however, focuses on active transport. Active transport uses ATP or other energy sources to move molecules from low to high concentration and remember this sign represents concentration against the gradient. So this requires energy because it's not a passive flow down the gradient, it's pushing molecules against the gradient. So we'll look at a couple examples in this video. The first example we'll look at are protein pumps. Protein pumps are exactly what they sound like. They are proteins that pump molecules against the gradient and require energy. So we'll look at two examples here. So protein pumps is our first classification. The first example we'll look at are proton protein pumps. These are often used, especially in cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Let me zoom in a little bit. In proton protein pumps, okay, this transport protein moves protons, moves H+, against the gradient using ATP. And we'll use this picture right here as our example. Okay, so here is the protein pump. Here's the protein. It's sitting within the phospholipid bilayer. Inside the cell, we have a low concentration of protons. Outside the cell, in this space, we have a high concentration of protons. We want to move more protons from low to high concentration. So we're going to pump them through this protein, and this is going to require ATP or another energy source. And that's one example of a protein pump. Another example of a protein pump is the sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium pump is used to reset the nervous system after it sends a message. So it's incredibly important in our bodies. So we'll label that as B. That fits under protein pump as an example. So the sodium-potassium pump is a protein that actively transports both sodium and potassium against the gradient. And this helps reset the nervous system after it sends a signal. So we're going to actually draw this picture over here. So this is the sodium-potassium pump protein right here. And we'll label it B so you can match it up later. In this example, we're moving both sodium and potassium. So I'm going to make sodium orange. We have a low sodium concentration here, and we have a high sodium concentration here. So we use ATP in this case. We'll make this our little ATP right here to change the shape of this protein. When it changes the shape of this protein, it moves 3 sodium ions out from low to high concentration. Then on the outside of the cell, we have a low concentration of potassium. And on the inside of the cell, we have a high concentration of potassium. So this protein is going to use ATP to change shape to dump 3 sodium outside the cell, pushing that sodium from low to high concentration. And then it's going to pick up 2 potassium and move this potassium inside the cell against the gradient. So this protein is pumping both sodium against its gradient and potassium against its gradient to reset the nervous system. And then these ions will flow when neurons are sending messages, and then we'll have to reset it again. So that's one example of active transport. We're using proteins to pump things against their gradient. Another example of active transport is endocytosis, and another one is exocytosis. So we'll start actually with exocytosis. So to start with exocytosis, that actually involves us going all the way back over here. So here we have the nucleus. Here we have the ER. On the ER, you can make things like proteins. Those proteins can be enveloped in a vesicle, which is made up of the same membrane from the ER. That vesicle will transport, I guess I should have labeled the vesicle in the same color. The vesicle will transport this protein through the cytoplasm until it gets to the cell membrane. Then what happens is that vesicle is made up of phospholipids, and the cell membrane is also made up of phospholipids. So the vesicle fuses with the cell membrane and becomes part of the cell membrane, actually making the cell membrane bigger. And when that happens, the proteins that were in the vesicle, as this vesicle comes up, it comes up, and it fuses with the membrane. Those proteins are now outside the cell, and we've undergone exocytosis. And this process, while we're not specifically talking about high-low concentration necessarily, it does use energy, so it's classified as active transport. So we'll label this one too, exocytosis. I always think of exo as exiting the cell. So in exocytosis, a vesicle fuses with the cell membrane, and exports materials out of the cell, right? And actually what happens is this vesicle is made of phospholipids and the cell membrane is made of phospholipids. So when these fuse together, it actually increases the size of the cell membrane. So the cell membrane size increases here because of that. And then the smooth ER will have to make more phospholipids to make more cell membrane, etc. Sometimes we need to bring things into the cell. So that's our last example on this page, which is endocytosis. In endocytosis, you have something outside the cell that needs to be brought in. Could be a virus, could be a bacteria, could be a food, could be all sorts of things. So whatever this thing is outside the cell, okay, it bunches up near the cell membrane, and then whatever needs to be brought in, okay, is kind of sits next to the cell membrane. So again, this is the cell membrane right here. What happens is this cell membrane pinches in until these two parts of the cell membrane connect, and this becomes its own vesicle, bringing in food or water or waste into the cell. So in this instance, because this part of the cell membrane becomes a vesicle right here, the cell membrane actually becomes smaller. But because endo and exocytosis are happening all the time, you kind of maintain homeostasis. Because this is making the cell membrane bigger, this is making it smaller. And again, you need energy for this to occur. So I always think endocytosis is into the cell. Okay? Materials are brought into the cell. The vesicle forms from the membrane. So this decreases membrane size. And again, this fits into active transport because endocytosis requires energy, active transport, right? Exocytosis requires energy, active transport, and protein pumps require energy. This is why they all fit on the active transport side. So thank you for watching my video on active transport.